What's up, y'all? All right.
What's up, Chad?
Well, hey, y'all. Thanks for having us out virtually tonight. Great to meet everybody. I'm Chad. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and partner at ASW Distillery. So tonight we're going to be sampling through our core lineup, which includes Fiddler Unison Bourbon, which is a sweet, smooth, wheated bourbon. Resurgence Rye, which is 100% malted rye product that we distill. Next up will be Duality Double Malt. So this is really unique. It's 50% malted rye, 50% cherry smoked malted barley. Kind of the same way that craft beer got real experimental starting 20, 25 years ago. We're trying to do the same thing, and Duality is probably first and foremost an example of that. Next up, we'll be sampling Fiddler Georgia Heartwood, which is our cask strength single barrel expression of Fiddler. We actually have 3 line extensions of Fiddler, 2 of which we're sampling tonight. The third of which, Soloist, is a high malt bourbon that we distill on our copper pot stills. We don't have quite enough to take it outside the state of Georgia yet, but we are obviously trying to crank out as much as we can to get there in the not too distant future. And last but not least, we've got Tire Fire. This is our heavily peated single malt that it's a little bit different than a lot of heavily peated Scottish single malts in that we age this in new cooperage. So that gives you a quick overview of what we're sampling tonight. Now, let's go ahead and crack open the Fiddler Unison. Go ahead and pour it into our glass. I am doing a little dry June, so I'm going to leave these unopened, but I've obviously got as much product and I've sampled them probably 3,000 or 4,000 times at the very least. So I definitely have a decent sense for what they smell and taste like. So before we go through Fiddler Unison itself as the product, and now that you've got a little bit in your glass to take the edge off of my boring presentation, a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today. Our 2 founders, Jim and Charlie, they had been roommates in college way back in the day. They're like, in their 90s at this point, not really, but it sure feels like that sometimes. They have really, really lame jokes. But they decided in about early 2010 that they wanted to try to make their own rye whiskey. And at the time, rye whiskey hadn't really started its resurgence yet. So they ultimately decided, all right, if we're going to take this and make a product out of it, we can either sit on something for years, or we can try to start with something clear, very lightly aged. So they partnered with a distillery in Charleston called Terra Sentia to make a very lightly aged whiskey, a type of whiskey called a spirit whiskey that is predominantly neutral spirits that had some basically raw bourbon in it as well. So they launched that brand, American Spirit Whiskey, in 2011 in the state of Georgia. It gained a little bit of a cult following in Georgia, but what they realized is there's only there's only so much you can do with a clear, unaged whiskey. And B, they really needed somebody who actually knew what they were doing on distillation, and that we needed to go big and actually raise money and build out a space. So in early 2015, our master distiller, Justin, who had about 15 years of craft booze making experience at the time, Justin and I both joined Jim and Charlie. So this was early 2015. The 4 of us went to our 75 best friends, and we were like, hey, you may be invested in stocks, bonds, real estate, what have you, but have you ever considered investing in a company with a high likelihood of failure? And they were like, the thought really hadn't crossed our mind. And we were like, well, we've got the perfect opportunity for you, a craft distillery. So fortunately, Justin, in his infinite foresight, had become incredibly good at distilling and had developed a liquid resume. So we were able to take bottles of stuff that he had made, single malts, his rye, which became Resurgence, the double malt product, which became Duality, and presented that to investors. And ultimately, we closed within 6 weeks on our $2 million capital raise because of the quality of his juice that may or may not have been made pre-legally on his tiny little pot still. So that was in 2015. We closed on that round. In early 2016, we finally were able to light up our stills. We have beautiful double copper pot stills. If some of y'all got the Drambino sampler packs, you probably got this tasting card in the middle of it. That is a schematic of our Vendome copper pot still setup. 500-gallon wash still, 300-gallon spirit still. And so we started cranking out juice. And that sort of got us to close to where we are today. And in the intervening 5 years, we've launched all the brands in front of us, plus some more specialty whiskeys like an Irish style whiskey called Druid Hill. We have a rotating series of single malts called Americanic that kind of allows us to highlight different profiles. So we have like a Speyside style. We have a Highland style called Burns Night that the Scotch Whisky Association sued us over. Because they thought, they said it was too close to Robert Burns' Supper. They lost, by the way, we won. So all of that is to say, the core that we have here today is sort of, these are our workhorses. These are what keep the lights on, but we also have some specialty products as well that are sort of interesting for folks, especially in the single malt territory. So in 2019, we opened our second location, which was our Barrel House. The one that I mentioned is in downtown Atlanta or near there. That's about 15,000 square feet with a tasting room at the front of it. And then just earlier this year, we opened our battery facility, which has the vodka and the gin stills along with the tasting room as well. It has been just crushing it. I mean, we knew that the battery facility was incredibly busy because of the Braves, but we just could not grasp the magnitude of it. So if you're ever in town for a Braves game or for any other reason, I would love to see y'all. Feel free to ping me and we'll taste some good whiskey straight out of the barrel. All right. So any questions before we jump into the products themselves, the tasting, and questions about whiskey? Yes.
Well, I guess it's about whiskey. Your gin and vodka stills, are you going to go keep with that line, or are you going to start distilling whiskey out of there as well?
Good question. The vodka is already starting to take off in Georgia, and we are hearing, we have a prototype of our gin that we've been carrying around to all the premier retail accounts there. I think the vodka and the gin are going to take up all our capacity on that still setup. So yeah, we will. I thought it would be pretty cool to take one of our mash bills that we normally distill on our copper pot stills and then go distill them on column stills and then let them age side by side. And you could have a pretty cool pot versus column, like, A/B test. That is probably not in the near future, but who knows, maybe so.
On this Fiddler, it has really good legs to it. It looks like there's a real high sugar content to it.
Yeah.
How long is that age for?
So Fiddler Unison is long story short, Fiddler Unison is a marriage of two bourbons, one of which is about 4.5 years old, and one of which is about 3.5 years old. And so the story behind Fiddler is we knew we were going to be distilling a bunch of whiskeys grain to glass in-house, Resurgence, Duality, Tire Fire, etc. We did want the Fiddler line to allow us to showcase cool things happening across the country that we then bring in-house and fiddle with, hence the name Fiddler. Puns are funnier the drunker you get, so that was more of like a 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. kind of name. So it also helped that our master distiller, Justin, is a fiddler in a bluegrass band. Probably not one that you've heard of, but they do perform around Georgia occasionally. So Unison takes a high wheat bourbon that we are buying from MGP, and it marries it with our high malt bourbon that we are distilling on our copper pot stills. And so the 4.5-year-old portion is the MGP distillate, and the 3.5-year-old portion is the Soloist pot still distillate from our facility. So, average age of a little over 4 years old. And so, yeah, excuse me. So yes, to your point, has great legs, really nice sort of copper tone to, not to be confused with the sunscreen, nice copper amber color to it. Has anybody gotten to sort of really dig into the nose on it?
Almost reminds me a little bit of a 4-grain, at least off the nose, just with.
Yes, absolutely. And your nose is incredibly adept because the 4-grain is the Soloist. It is actually we distill it from corn and then 3 different malted grains: malted wheat, malted rye, and malted barley. So that's where you're probably getting some of that 4-grain complexity.
As far as your grains are, where you guys are you guys sourcing them throughout Georgia, or do you have places from all over the state or the country that you're getting a lot of your grains from?
That made me laugh a little bit because the very first wave of Fiddler Soloist, which is our in-house pot distilled bourbon, we were getting an heirloom varietal of corn from a Georgia farm, and it was incredibly corny. Like just think taking a bite out of a big ear of corn. And it was so overpoweringly corny because heirloom varietals just have so much more corn flavor to them that we were a little concerned it wasn't going to mellow out and that we were going to have to release a separate product line called like cornography or something. So fortunately it did mellow out, but it taught us a lesson to go with a less aggressive heirloom varietal. So the corn for Soloist, for example, is a Midwest standard dent corn. The malted rye for Resurgence we get from the Midwest. Tire Fire is a great example of being a little bit focused on, I guess you'd say, terroir. We get a 100% heavily peated malt that comes out of Inverness, Scotland. It's at 45 parts per million. It actually has to be shipped over in a separate container because it is so pungent, it will contaminate other things if it's not sort of sealed up from it. And then the Druid Hill Irish style whiskey that I mentioned, we use a malted barley that comes from just north of Dublin from a 6th generation family farm there. So we get sort of regionally specific and interesting where we can, while also trying to be able to have a replicable, scalable source of grains. For example, Resurgence is our second best selling product. So relying on a single heirloom farmer in Georgia would be difficult to maintain its flavor profile. Great question. Other questions?
Cooperages, do you guys bounce around, or do you have one particular one you guys use?
Yeah, the cooperage story is one of, has evolved significantly over time. So very early on, when we were having to lay down some product in 15s and 30s, we had a couple cooperages, Barrel Mill, Barrel 53. They were both sort of in the Ozarks, were able to get us those size barrels. But as you all know full well, I mean, you can't, it's pretty cost disadvantageous to continue aging stuff in 15s and 30s because they cost the exact same as a 53-gallon barrel. So we ended up moving to independent stave. And then the guys who founded Smooth Ambler, they started a cooperage of their own. I think it's called West Virginia Barrel. It's got West Virginia in the name. They're able to do some really cool stuff. So we just started working with them because Justin, our distiller, worked with them to do what is called a spiral cut barrel. So they are toasting it first, then charring it, then taking a little knife and carving out a little spiral into that char layer so our whiskey can access the red layer from the toast a little bit quicker. So that it is leading to really cool aging profile for us. So they are almost exclusively our barrel provider these days.
Thanks.
Are you using that type of barrel on all your all the whiskeys, or
all of the whiskeys that go into new cooperage go into that
cooperage? Okay.
Days. Yeah. We have like Duality, as we'll touch on a little bit, is one of its themes is dual, like malted rye, malted barley. You can't really see it on this small label, but on the real bottle, it has a lot of other dualistic themes. And so we also age Duality predominantly in new cooperage, but there are a few used barrels that will mingle in. So those used barrels are typically our used Fiddler barrels. And then we have started to play around with some finishing methods, particularly on the malt portfolio. So we've got Duality aging in a Pinot Noir barrel, for example. We've got a couple single malts aging in some sherry butts. We've got Tire Fire that we just released that was finished in rum casks. So all of our new cooperage is a spiral cut, but other finishing techniques don't necessarily have the spiral cut. So what y'all think? Fiddler.
Really like it. It's a very easy drinker.
Mm-hmm.
Great one to start today with, but it just, surprising to me that it's isn't smoked, isn't peated, because you do get that toasted out of it for being so light. It's really nice.
Yeah, it is our workhorse. It's just a 90 proof, sort of down the middle, you know, for folks who can't get their Weller. It is a nice, like, just like you said, easy drinking, weeded bourbon. And it also makes a really, really mean old fashioned. So Georgia is very, very backwards in its liquor laws. So we weren't able to serve cocktails in our tasting room until 2017, late 2017. And so the very first night that we were able to serve cocktails, we had an old fashioned on the menu made with Fiddler. And no joke, one of the last patrons of the night goes, "Man, I love that old fashioned. That is the second best old fashioned I've ever had." And we were like, that is a weird sort of backhand compliment. And we asked him what his first favorite was, and he said he couldn't remember. I don't know exactly what his deal was, but we thought that was so funny. We took it and ran with it. So we always say that Fiddler makes the second best old fashioned in town.
It's pretty unique. It's like it's got the complexity of a 4 grain, but it like smooths it out with, I think, the part that's more heavily weeded, so it makes it a little bit more approachable and less sort of like sometimes with 4 grain you'll get it almost tastes like you're at a farm drinking.
Yeah.
So
You know, our early research indicated that whiskey that tastes like barnyard doesn't necessarily sell as well. So we tried to tone down the barnyard aspect. However, we did want to create a product that tastes like burning rubber. So we released Tire Fire. We'll get to that later. Is anyone on the call an Isla fan? Okay.
John,
We got a couple of y'all. That's good, because it is a very polarizing whiskey. My wife and I spent our honeymoon in Isla, so we love it. But I would say only about 20% of people do, and that is just okay, perfectly fine.
we've been branching into scotches within the group a little bit and trying to, because you find a lot of just overlap between scotch lovers going into bourbon and then vice versa. So there's a lot of us that have been bourbon centric trying to move into learning about scotches and slowly getting there.
Cool.
And I came from the other side. I was more Scotch, getting into bourbon and rye.
That's how I started. I started with single malts, and then have moved into rye. It's weird, like only with bourbons, but for some reason with bourbons, I have occasional attitude issues. So I'm kind of strict orders to rye and single malts. But man, I love me some rye. And duality is a really cool, as we'll find out in a second. It's like this perfect. It's got the rye punch, the stone fruit, the spice, but it has a smoky characteristic as well. Everyone want to maybe crack open the Resurgence? Cool.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So Resurgence, as I think I mentioned earlier, we're distilling it from 100% malted rye. 3% of that is chocolate malted rye. So that just means we're that 3% is roasted a little bit longer, kind of like you would roast coffee beans to a little bit darker roast. The artwork is by a pretty prominent Athens, Georgia artist named David Hale. He used to do tattoos a lot, but he's since moved on to murals. He's also done artwork for bands like the Avett Brothers. And so our master distiller is good friends with him from way back in the day. So he did the really cool Phoenix. Resurgence, the name comes from the city motto of Atlanta, which just means effectively rising from the ashes. There's the Phoenix after the Civil War, sort of rebuilding the city. And so when Jim and Charlie, our founders, initially approached Justin, they were like, "Hey, we love rye whiskey right now. Can we make a rye?" Justin was big. He was a home brewer at the time. He loved working with malts. And he said, "Let's do something pretty different. Let's do a 100% malted rye." Very few people, if any, are doing it on the East Coast at this point in time. And so we did, and Justin was kind of taking inspiration from, if y'all have heard of Old Pogue Distillery, way back in the day, before it reopened recently, Old Pogue before Prohibition had a type of whiskey that was made from 100% malted rye. And in fact, the TTB, in designing their beverage alcohol manual, created an entire class of whiskey called rye malt whiskey to basically cover that type of whiskey that Old Pogue was making. Old Pogue got mothballed for a long time, Prohibition and thereafter. So we're kind of calling this an Appalachian style rye, because Justin's kind of taking his cue from Old Pogue up in Kentucky, foothills, Appalachian. We're pretty close to the foothills down in Georgia of Appalachia. So it drinks, as you may have noticed, I get a lot of like apricot, graham cracker on the nose. And then if you've moved on to actually sampling it, it's, to me, a little bit like a s'more in a glass. That graham cracker continues on through the palate, a lot of chocolate notes. Yeah, confectionery. So I call that confectionery, kind of marshmallow. It is, I don't know. And it's also got this really, because, well, I'll describe what it has. It has this kind of grainy texture almost. Not that it's actually grainy, but it's just got kind of a really rich mouthfeel. And that is coming from the fact that if we go back to our diagram here, when Justin is mashing in, he is actually putting the grain solids in the mash cooker, and then we're transferring the grain solids into the fermenters. And then those grain solids are going all the way into the wash still. So you'll see that practiced in Kentucky a fair amount, where it's grain in distillation, but you're seeing, generally in Kentucky, you're seeing column stills, right? So by virtue of doing grain in distillation with our grains and combining that with the Scottish method of double copper pot distillation, Justin has created a pretty unique hybrid approach that allows him to pull a lot of flavor out of those grains.
This might be one of the best smelling ryes I've ever laid a nose on.
Yeah, isn't it great? This, so we only submit our spirits to the San Francisco World Spirits Competition. We think that and the IWSC over in Britain are basically the two, defining spirits competitions. The IWSC just takes a lot more money to enter because you have to ship spirits overseas. So we submit exclusively to San Francisco. This one won a double gold medal this year, and that we did a pretty exhaustive analysis back to 2018. And as of this year, we were in second place last year to Kings County, but as of this year, we surpassed Kings County in being the most awarded craft whiskey distillery in the U.S. since 2018 at that competition. And Resurgence got a double gold this year, is to sort of bolster that medal count.
The chocolate is incredible.
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Well, and the malting too just takes it out and softens up the spices that turn some people off of rye. Yep. And makes this a much more approachable style of rye to somebody who's new to that, plus the copper still versus the column.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely get that oily feel, whereas you get the mouth feel in it. You can tell it's a little bit oily, which is awesome. That's really good.
Yeah,
I love rye. Rye is my thing, and this is the different rye. It has that good sweetness to it, the chocolatiness, but in the end, it just changes on you, and you get a little bit of the spice in it, and it finishes off really, really well. You guys did a really good job on that. I mean, you can taste the malt to it as well, but that finish just, I mean, I don't know what it is, but that you get a peppery, almost a little bit of spice at the end there. I really like that.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the summer months, I gravitate towards Resurgence a lot. It's, it's not smoky like some of the others, but it also, for any cocktail drinkers out there, it makes the best Manhattan I've ever had. Just 2 parts Resurgence, 1 part. I use Dolan Rouge vermouth, a couple dashes of bitters in there, and then I go a little drier by garnishing it with a lemon peel. It's really nice.
Sounds delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Like a spicy s'more.
Yeah, exactly.
And what states are you guys available in? I know obviously Florida and Georgia, outside of those two.
So we are also, the entire portfolio, or at least everything that we're sampling here, is also available in East Tennessee. So that's Chattanooga, Knoxville, and the Tri-Cities area. We haven't gone into Nashville yet, although that's probably next in terms of like contiguous states to Georgia. We've been getting a lot of interest from Texas, of all places. So I think Texas is probably like next up in terms of full-on distribution. Southern California has started to, we actually have a small distributor in Southern California. So San Diego all the way up to LA. And then we are partnered with a couple of online vendors, the best of which in my opinion is Sealbox. They focus pretty exclusively on craft distilleries. They can deliver to about close to half the states in the union. I think Florida is one of them. They're actually based out of Jacksonville, even though they have to receive their stuff up in DC. That's how they get around some of the laws for shipping. But they can ship to about half the states out there, including some of the big ones.
I think one of the most important questions we could probably get to is, when are you guys going to do a barrel proof version of this?
Man, we have been having trouble keeping up with the 86 proof, but we released one cask strength version last year within our own tasting rooms, and we released one to the market in Georgia. I think probably starting middle of next year, we'll start to be able to develop a real barrel program around this. It sounds like you're sort of imagining what this is like in its barrel strength format. It is unreal. I mean, just take all the caramel and the toffee and, multiply it by 10, along with just some really nice heat, and the oiliness gets ratcheted up. It's fantastic. So, just to reiterate, probably middle of next year, I would imagine we would probably start with about 10 to 15 barrels in the program. And then the following year, I guess that would be 2023 at that point, would probably have more like 40 barrels in the program.
Yeah, we would like to be one of those 10 barrels in the program.
Duly noted.
Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth, John. No question.
Well, in the meantime, maybe I should try to rustle up a bottle just to send your group so you can split it amongst yourselves and just get to work anticipating it highly.
Yeah, for sure, man. That would be great.
The rye girl sitting right next to me.
Yeah, my wife took my glass and didn't return it to me, so I had to pour myself another one.
Well, I'm glad we sent you 3.4 ounce samples.
Yeah.
You all were definitely very generous with the samples. So
yeah, we really appreciate.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad y'all reached out. It's way easier when folks come to you instead of having to hunt people down. So this was awesome. It was literally like, John's email hit my inbox and I was like, I have literally been on the phone with Total Wine in Naples. Like, we're setting up tastings with our tastings company, for some of the Total Wines in your area. So it was perfect.
John's the man.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're really trying to build that relationship with the Total Wines here. We actually have a barrel coming through with them. We did a Makers 46, the stave pick.
Oh yeah. How many staves?
We had, was it a choice of 4 or 5?
Choice of 5. I think we had 3. We picked 3 out of the 5, and one heavier than the other.
And the name is We Want S'more. It really
Love it.
It really hit that s'mores note. It really came out well.
That is awesome. And you say you already took delivery of it, or it's getting there soon?
Yeah, July, right?
Yeah, it should be end of July. Yeah.
Excellent.
Sure.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I'll just briefly go out of order. So we also finished this on staves of oak as well. So this will not be too dissimilar of a profile for you, I bet. All right. So how about some duality?
Absolutely.
Cool. So just in all candidness, this is my favorite of our products. I drink this every day I'm alive. and it is this really cool. Justin is mashing, fermenting, and distilling 2 different malted grains together, right? So it's half 50% malted rye, which is, he's taken his cue from Resurgence, which is 100% malted rye. And then the other half of the grain bill is 50% cherry smoked malted barley. And don't let the malt content throw you off. I think it actually drinks more like a traditional rye in its stone fruit characteristics than Resurgence does, but it packs in that additional sort of nuanced layer of some smoky attributes. I get on the nose some sort of cedar, some cranberry, obviously the smoke, the honey. And then on the palate, I think the honey carries through for me. Obviously, everybody's palate is a little bit different. There's like a toffee to coffee kind of quality to it. Oh, and it also, I don't know if cigar drinkers out there, but it pairs really, really well with a cigar.
That's in Matt's wheelhouse over there.
There you go.
What kind of cigars you like, Chad?
I'm not much of an aficionado. I don't even, quite frankly, know what brands I've tried before.
Yeah, this is it does.
Next time you're in Southwest Florida, we'll smoke some cigars together.
Yeah.
I imagine there is probably a pretty reputable, solid source for where some of those come from, right?
I have a 6-foot humidor right inside that door.
Oh, cool. Man, I need to pay a visit to everyone's house down there. We got the badass bar, we got the humidor, and of course the beach, which is with the humidity here in Atlanta, the beach is always a nice reprieve.
Yeah, definitely. I'll have you stop by the house. Got the humidor, got the bar, boats out back.
Welcome to Florida.
Living the dream. Yeah, for real.
I can't put my finger on the nose. Like, it's so complex on the nose that I'm getting thrown in like 6 different directions.
I feel the same way. It's I almost have to let it just sort of unfurl for a couple of minutes and then come back to it, maybe add a drop of water and come back to it. That duality. And then there's one single malt that were giving me fits on the nose for forever. And finally I was like, oh, that note is cranberry. That note is cedar, but yeah, it's pretty difficult to unwind on at least the nose.
It is certainly pleasant, trying to get through what's coming in there. It is, only because I heard cherry wood. Of course, cherry's in my mind. That's what I can smell now.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny bit of the smoke, which I love. Sweet.
That cedar. That as soon as you mentioned a little bit of cedar, I'm kind of like, no, that totally smells like a cedar box.
Yeah, for sure.
And what's interesting is that smoky note expands up into the sinus cavity as you're drinking it, which is unusual for something not out of Isla or looking at that at the Highland Park. So something produced with this, it's a nice expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure, like everything else, the cast strength of this has got to be insane.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, yeah. That is like, when I say duality is my favorite, it's often 88 proof, which is what we're drinking, but it's predominantly cask strength. I mean, it's like the butterscotch starts to really come through on it. It's dynamite.
Don't tease us, man.
Well, so duality we actually have a full scale barrel program with now.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right up our alley.
It's almost like a Scotch rye hybrid.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of hit for the people that aren't big into Scotch, it only broaches the subject of it, but then with it. Like, it's not like, oh, I don't like, or I like rye, I don't like Scotch. Like, it doesn't go too far into one of those spheres where it's offensive to somebody that's too into one category or the other. And it's almost like a perfect.
I do not like Scotch at all. Like, I bought a bottle of Scotch. It was a really nice Scotch. I opened it. I tried it. I'm like, I have to like this. No, I couldn't like it. I could not do anything. I tried to like it. I couldn't. I gave it to a friend. And this has, for me at least, has like a leathery, the cedar. I get the wood, but I get that leathery taste.
Yeah.
Really good mouthfeel. And I can't help but enjoy it at the same time. It's not a Scotch, but it gives you that. I could like a Scotch and it makes me want to like go back to a Scotch bottle. I know I'm not going to like it, but it has that, okay, we took a Scotch and now we made a whiskey. Like, it is very, very good. Hello.
Well, so speaking of the barrels, most of the duality casks, actually, I take that back. No, we've gone through most of the 30s, but I think we do have a few 30s left within the barrel program. So it is, those 30s obviously are a smaller takedown. Those are about 18 six packs versus a full 53 is closer to 30, 32. So it's this one has been really selling particularly the barrel program has been selling really well this year, because I think it's a little, we get it. Like bourbon and rye are, they're categories that people get. Dualities, for some folks, I think it's awesome. A lot of y'all on the call do as well, but some folks, it's a little experimental. So it's a smaller investment, I guess you'd say.
They're missing out.
Yep.
How's the barrel program been for you guys? What's been sort of most popular? What are you guys planning on changing? And I guess
so the original product in the barrel program is the one that's next up in our queue. So we rolled out the barrel program of Fiddler Georgia Heartwood back in 2018 with just a couple barrels, and it has since grown every year, such that this year I think we'll do about 60 total barrels. And then next year, I'm hoping that'll grow even further. Duality, we rolled out the barrel program in late 2019. So I think we did about 18 to 20 duality barrels last year, and we're already sitting at 12 this year. And we have, we probably have, I don't know, about 25 that we could go, 25 more to go. So I know total themselves are bringing in 3 duality barrels in about a month or two. We've got a couple duality barrels going to the totals in Texas. So they're getting probably a third of the remaining barrels, and so we're the rest we're sort of sending samples out to right now to various groups.
How do you guys determine what qualifies for a single barrel as opposed to going into what's going into the final product?
Like in terms of what would be designated a single barrel versus what is going to go into the ultimate, mingled, 88 proof version?
Yes.
Yeah, great question. So our master distiller and our assistant distiller, they I think it's one of their favorite days of the week. They basically take samples from barrels and figure out which ones are going to have to be used to maintain the house consistency, and then all the rest get to go into the barrel program. What's really nice about like duality especially is the variability between the barrels is unreal. So like I was tasting with a group out of El Paso 3 weeks back, and there was one barrel that was incredibly dry. It was very very sort of earthy. There was one that was incredibly rich in your caramel, your toffee, and then there was one that was more of the leathery sort of smoky, and they chose the caramel rich one, which was my favorite as well. But it was a really fun experience because we were actually all doing it in person, and they were like, "This is," they couldn't even believe that it was like the same product, really.
It is remarkable how much different they can be.
Yep.
What are you barreling at? What proof are these going into the barrel?
So our bourbon, we are generally putting it between, call it 112 and 115. Resurgence is a little, it's tough to get real precise. I mean, we've got quite a few barrels that went in at the max of 125. We've also got quite a few barrels that are sitting at 110. Those are the two sort of main barrel entry proof on Resurgence. Duality, the barrel entry proofs were usually between 103 and 113. The ones we find that are getting picked for the single barrels usually are in like the 106 to 108 territory.
It's a good sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, since you're not chill filtering, thought it probably was at a lower proof, but I just wanted to see here because this is nice and clear and fresh.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. The very first batch of Fiddler we ever came out with, Fiddler was the first product we released. We don't chill filter, and so we bottled it at 86 proof. And have y'all ever seen whiskey start to what's called flocculate? It starts to, get the, the cloudiness, or even worse, sometimes it can get stringy things like the lipid coagulating. Fortunately, it didn't get the stringy things on us, but it did start to get cloudy. So we had to bump that proof up to 90 to prevent that. But I've seen a couple brands that may want to reevaluate their bottling proof, because when it starts to flocculate, if it gets stringy, it looks pretty gross in the bottle. All right. What do you think? You want to move on to our first, I guess, our only cask strength of the night?
Please,
Hey,
please.
Yeah.
It is a gorgeous color.
Yeah, isn't it? So Fiddler Georgia Heartwood is taking that high wheat, so 51 corn, 45 wheat, 4% malted barley mash bill, and finishing it on anywhere from 25 to 30 staves of Georgia oak that our master distiller Justin harvests with a couple of his friends up in North Georgia. The most recent harvest was in January of this year. It's on our Instagram if you want to go see a video of him doing it. But ultimately, he's seasoning this heartwood that he's harvesting from the oak trees for well over a year, usually around 18 months outdoors. So it's just leaching all the tannins out of it, which is the ideal way to season wood. And then he's cutting up the slabs into smaller staves that he is then hand charring. He actually has stopped hand charring. We have a partner who hand chars it for us. But each of those staves is pretty different. The size is pretty similar and the char level is pretty similar, but like it's very much an artisanal sort of process, which is really cool because that means a barrel that has 25 staves here and a barrel that has 25 staves here, even though they're pretty close in our rickhouse, are going to be really different, largely due to that stave composition and its aging profile. So this one, as I mentioned, was kind of the kickstart of our whole barrel program. This one is consistently around 115 to 118 proof in its strength. So this one, I don't know what yours is. The one that I have in hand is 58.1%. And I just get it takes some of those wheated bourbon notes from Fiddler Unison that we tried earlier. And A, it just like puts them on steroids, but B, it also, the staves that Justin harvests adds this really cool maple syrup dimension to me that I think is really, really dynamite.
How long are the staves in there for? Or how long do you guys?
It's kind of up to, Justin always suggests not longer than 90 days. Because those staves, they have a lot of oak surface, and he's putting 25 to 30 of them in there. So it's adding a lot of oak punch in a very short amount of time. We've seen folks who are 30 days. We've seen usually around 60 days. We've seen a couple of folks draw it out to 90. I wouldn't recommend going all the way to 90, but it's if you have a group who really loves really oak forward, that may be your profile.
So when you're trying to when these groups try to pick a barrel, do you guys provide them with 30 days, 60 days, 90-day samples?
We absolutely can, yeah.
Oh, just to see which one they would like.
That is really good. I mean, usually when you get the higher proof stuff, the barrel proof, I don't get much legs to it. It's really quick. You know, the sugar content's a lot lower. This has really good legs still. I mean, I don't even know how you did. Everything you've had so far is very unique, but it's extremely high quality, extremely good so far. So, I mean, kudos to you guys. You're doing awesome.
Thanks, Colt. You know, it's interesting, like you always, we loved Justin's juice early on, and we all, I guess we sort of thought that it would catch on really quickly, and these things just take time. And it's been like all of a sudden in the last, I don't know, probably 9 to 12 months, we've started to get inquiries from Colorado, from Washington State, from Maryland, from y'all in Southwest Florida. And it's like, oh, that's right. These things just take time to build. And then finally, once you've established a quality, a reputation for quality, like the name just starts to percolate out a little bit.
Awesome.
What I like about this one is it's much fuller on the palate. It's a couple of the others didn't take me at the front of the tongue, front of the palate. And this one has that immediate impact and then resonates throughout. And it's just really nice. It's balanced with that. It's not hitting just in one portion of it, but filling it up at different portions of each sip.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it, Amber.
There was something in it I couldn't quite, in the palate, I couldn't quite get, but finally I think it's hot buttered popcorn.
Yeah, totally.
Or am I crazy?
Nope, I think you're right.
It's really amazing the difference, when you go from, a cut 45% to a barrel strength, how much more it always brings it out, elevates all the flavors. It's nicely done. It's it makes me, I want to go back inside and grab the other one, the Total Wine Store pick.
Oh, yeah.
See the, my wife's over there whispering, do it.
Yeah, you really should. But you have to share with everyone on the call.
Right. Sean and John's already had it.
He will. So it started almost as that buttered popcorn, but then like moved into almost like a peanut brittle kind of just mid to back palate that I know first sip, I think it probably went down a little too quick and just, I'm like, oh, it might have burnt me out for a minute. And then second and third just definitely got used to it. And it's growing.
Well, if you're not burnt out yet, we've got Tire Fire on the horizon.
Scorch the earth.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one, man, with that name. That's going to be some peated stuff.
Rookie.
So my first dive into the whiskey world was an Islay Lagavulin 16. My brother introduced me to that.
That's a damn.
And from then on, I mean the Islay whiskey, Scotch. It's just that's just my it's close to the chest, man. I have a lot of bottles of Islay Scotch, and most people don't like that, but hey.
I got a funny story for you about Lagavulin. So on our honeymoon, y'all know the iconic murals on each of Lagavulin, Ardbeg, and Laphroaig. It's like whitewashed walls, and their names are huge across them. All three of those distilleries are literally like a stone's throw from each other along the shoreline. And so we started the day at Lagavulin, and then we were going to go to Ardbeg, and then we were going to go to Laphroaig all in one day. And so the distillery manager at Lagavulin, he's been there for 30 years. He's this old curmudgeonly dude. And he's like a gnome practically. And so after he gets done,
Arthur, isn't it?
everyone in our group wants to take a photo with him outside by the Lagavulin mural. And he's clearly poking fun at his neighbor. He goes, "All right, everyone smile, Laphroaig," his competitor right down the way. And then we go to Ardbeg next, right at lunchtime. And our tour manager goes, "Don't look now, over there on the stool, the dude who's falling down, he's so drunk, that is Jim Murray of Jim Murray's Whiskey Bible fame." And sure enough, the fedora on, and he was like slunched. I mean, it was at lunchtime, and he's already slumped over.
It was Ian MacArthur at Lagavulin, wasn't it?
That sure was Ian. Yep. He's so I take it you've been.
Eric Simpson's another Scotch guy over there, man. He
There we go.
likes his peated stuff.
Ian is awesome. He was making, I was taking, I had my pad out and I was writing tasting notes. He goes, "What are you, a journalist?" I love giving everyone crap.
I saw somebody with him, not to get too off subject, but somebody brought some Elijah Craig barrel proof to Ian MacArthur and let him try it. It was like 120 something, whatever it was. And he was like, he goes, "Oh," just falls back and goes, "Oh, it's quite sweet. It's good." Yeah.
He is really funny.
So I know we don't get to try it tonight, but the Druid, I really like Irish whiskey. That's where I started out. That's my niche. Like, I went to Jameson in Ireland. Like, they have one of the best tours, everything. Like, they're phenomenal. Like, what is the taste of that Druid? Like, if you can explain it a little bit, I really want to try it. I'm going to go get a bottle as soon as I can.
Yeah. So Sealbox has it, if you want to order it, but basically Justin hit the very first whiskey he ever received was as a graduation gift from high school. And it was Green Spot. And that was when he was like, "I want to be a distiller and make this." And so that was his sort of iconic, fountainhead of all of his, passion. And so he effectively wanted to make an American version of a Green Spot. So it is distilled in the sort of old pure pot still way, in the sense that he's triple distilling it. He's distilling it from a mash bill combined between malted barley, about 70% malted barley, and 30% unmalted barley. So it has that leathery note that it sounds like you like that leathery note from Duality. So it's a little lighter than Duality, and obviously doesn't have the smoke character, but it's got this like green apple quality, this leathery quality, beautiful kind of almost like a candied apple quality, I guess you'd say. It's his favorite whiskey, and it won a double gold medal at San Francisco this year. So that was kind of a vindication of his own palate.
That's awesome. So back to this, the total wine pick is total burnt brown sugar. Has that whole note that the other one does, like went buttered popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
This is brown sugar, caramelized brown sugar.
I would say that is probably the more common note.
Mm-hmm. It's really good. Both of them are excellent.
Yeah.
It's a tough call between which one. It really is.
Do you
sorry.
Did the one? Sorry. I was just gonna ask. Did the one that I sent you have a sticker on it? That might. I can't remember. Heck, I sent you.
Yeah, the sticker I think was removed, or maybe the label. Yeah, something. Yeah, it didn't have a sticker on it.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted somebody. I think somebody had a question. Nope. All right. So.
All I know is I poured Tire Fire and it stung the nostrils.
Good. That's a perfect segue. It's like I planted you in the crowd. So let's move on to Tire Fire, so we can blow everyone's palate out and they can't taste anything for the rest of the night. It's actually not quite that intense. I think the nose is it's going to have a ton of peat on the palate, but it's not like Octomore, if anyone's ever had Brooklyn.
Oh, yeah. Do you know the ppm for this one?
It's 45 parts per million. So 45? That is a little higher than Lafroig, but by virtue of us aging it in new cooperage, it is a little sweeter than most Lafroigs.
I'd rather have that barrel proof one.
So this one's sitting at 91 proof. Just as a funny aside, we were originally thinking of doing it at 91.1 proof, like 911 Tire Fire. But
that'd be cool.
We were releasing it right at the time of the California wildfires. We're just decimating wine country back in 2018. We're like, I think that's insensitive, so we just went with 91 proof. But it is 100% heavily peated malted barley, 45 parts per million. New cooperage. Justin he makes pretty tight cuts on it, right? So you got your heads, hearts, and tails cut. He actually makes a fourth cut called the 4 shots. that he disposes of entirely, but the cuts on this are pretty tight. So he's not picking up a whole lot of super earthy phenolic characteristics. So it definitely has a lot of peat, but I wouldn't, at least for me, it's not like overwhelmingly so.
What's this tire fire normally run price wise?
49.
As a huge Lafroig fan, one of my least favorite of their normal expressions is the triple wood.
Mhm.
Only because of how much it costs for what I think it is.
Yeah.
This is a damn good substitute for half the price.
There you go.
It tastes very similar to what triple wood tastes like, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. I just think Lafroig triple wood is way overpriced, but this is dead on balls accurate. This is good.
Thanks, Eric. So yeah, I imagine it's probably created a bit of a polarized response amongst some folks out there. Do apologize for that.
Yeah, it's all right. I can't do it.
Yep.
Nope. 100% just can't do it.
Can't in the peat.
I tried, man. I tried.
No, but Matt, it's not as aggressive as some of them out there. Where, like, you're just completely dominated with your mouth of just the heat, smoke, and like you can't.
You need to get in my head, because that's exactly what that is. To somebody who's sitting here smoking a cigar, especially, it's I can't do it. Like,
yeah. Well, hopefully you have enough of one of the other samples, maybe Resurgence or something.
Yeah, I poured another cast strength.
There you go.
I tried it, but no.
Keep burning those peat logs, man. This is good.
Thank you, brother.
Malt it up.
We'll send some your
way. The duality will certainly make a home, and if I could get a hold of a cast strength of that, without a doubt.
I think Sealbox has 10 or 12 bottles left from their pick from earlier this year. So that might be a place to get it.
Just so you know, Matt is pretty aggressive on these calls and lets you know what he wants when he wants it. So obviously, as you could tell by his bar, he's pretty successful with his persuasion.
Yeah, but we do well with them. I mean, come on. Especially Sean, John, and everybody else on this call who's been at my bar.
How often do y'all get together? I mean, I guess the last year has been maybe more touch and go, but is it like a monthly thing, or quarterly or weekly, or what?
I mean, amongst us administrators, it's probably quarterly. I mean, we only started a little over a year ago.
Oh, cool.
It's been blossoming, and our area is definitely been growing, especially with their desire for whiskey. And since we're in between some major metropolitan areas, it's been increasingly difficult to get some recognition, at least because we don't have that like tentpole city. But I think it's been a lot of the fun that we have is reaching out and doing these kind of events with just not the main distilleries per se on the map, and showing people there's other options out there that you can easily find and that are affordable, and help people reach their bourbon and whiskey journey through just other means, as opposed to just following what everyone else is telling you what to find.
I think that's awesome.
And that's exactly why I'm a member of this group, although I also belong to groups on the East Coast. This group is much more welcoming, more friendly. There's less of the testosterone-driven, high-proof mentality to it. It's inclusive versus exclusive, and it is explorative, and has a very friendly demeanor to it that doesn't exist necessarily in much of Florida.
Interesting. Yeah.
Thanks for that, Amber.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
Anytime.
Amber.
Calling us soft.
No, I'm calling you welcome.
I know. I appreciate it.
There is a difference there.
That resonates though. I mean, we've found that, you know, we've seen that in Georgia. We've seen that in Tennessee. Like there are some folks who take it so seriously that it's sort of like, is this fun for you? Because it doesn't feel fun for people around you.
Well, this is a group that, for example, when they find something, they share it.
Yeah.
It's not a group that is keeping their honey holes. It's when something comes in, it's posted openly and shared. And that is so rare in the whiskey and bourbon communities. And, you know, bringing things together, it's, you know, reaching out to include, you know, even though I'm geographically separate, that, you know, the samples are still sent over to me when I can participate in these. And it really is a group that will have that organic growth because of it and be special for brands such as yours.
Cool. Yeah, this has been really fantastic. I mean, all the questions, the sort of openness to trying everything, you know, even tire fire for some of y'all who didn't expect that.
Yeah.
How did you all sort of get together? And I mean, because, you know, Amber, it sounds like you may not have necessarily known Sean or John or whoever before the group. How did you band together?
Well, for me, it was vested self-interest. And putting together a commercial event that some of these guys know about that isn't public yet, but was looking out there at other Florida groups and expanding, because I wasn't finding a good home group to just kind of exist in. And you know, looking out at the Facebook groups and seeing what was there and joining, and finding the atmosphere that said, you know, come on in, come join us. We're talking about different things. It's not just about the BTAC. It's not about the typical orientation, and people that were looking at the craft expressions, and came right in. And the admins were beyond welcoming. I keep coming back to that word, but it really is there. And I see other people in the group that aren't on the call tonight that are in several other groups that I'm also belong to, but don't participate in, that they're commenting more in this group, even though they're in Central Florida or Northern Palm Beach County or other areas of the state. We seem to find a home here that allows us to express ourselves.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I found this group by accident, actually. Last year, right before kind of quarantine kind of took everything over, buddy of mine up north, and I kind of been in the hobby for almost 10 years, I guess. Roughly 10 years. But I had wanted to try to start my own group down here, and I was trying to get my buddy to help me start one. And then I had found Sean randomly on Facebook, said people you may know or whatever. And it was like, we had a bunch of the same mutual friends that were all around kind of Southwest Florida, Sarasota area. And I reached out to him and said, hey, I was, looking to do this. And he apparently had already started the group. He apparently started Southwest Florida Bourbon. So I called him. I was like, how the hell don't we know each other? we literally had like the same exact mutual friends who we talked to like a lot. And I was like, why have we not met at all? So that's kind of how I got involved.
It was more a happy accident. Like, funny enough, my college roommate started a distillery about 2 years ago now up in Buffalo, New York. Was there for his grand opening by accident. And all of a sudden, like, I had enjoyed bourbon and it just opened up the eyes into like all the intricacies of it. And come back down here and you see there was no group or anything for our area. And so like more so as as COVID sort of started and you're having a drink from home, we started doing some just lock and case tests, like putting them in a little Tupperware as opposed to even the sample bottles, dropping them off at friends' houses. And we're like, oh, let's half-heartedly start a bourbon society. And now we're approaching 1,600 members and
That's amazing.
Like a little over a year, and doing barrel picks, and I guess making some waves and getting some recognition, at least down here. And it's, I mean, we couldn't do it without the community. And I think our main core values are just exploration, and there's so much good stuff out there. Like, don't just focus on whatever you think is trendy or what you can potentially resell, because that's not what this is about. It's about getting better bourbon whiskey in our area, and however you want to drink it, whatever you like, it's perfectly fine. Let's talk about it and let's all try it together.
I really wish there was a copy paste function for your group all across the US. That would be
I've been asked about it.
What do you find it tends to be, I guess, the norm as far as other groups? I mean, are people a little more, resale focused, or, not really appreciating kind of like the fellowship of bourbon? What do you think is missing?
That is interesting. We have been, so there are a couple groups in Atlanta that we're sort of, I guess, the type of group that you're describing is maybe that you aren't necessarily, and they are incredibly, resale focused. And we did a couple projects with them, and it was weird. They